Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
I thought that was Nicole Plank I was looking at too.
Hi, Bob.
Hey, Nicole, how in the hell are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Hello, everybody. Anybody else? Kathy, how are you? Anybody else on? Or is it just us so far?
I think it's just us.
Ah, okay. Oh, now there's David.
I am here.
How are you?
I'm well. How about you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
I love this. This allows me to get away from work for 2 hours at the end of the day.
Funny boy.
Oh no, it's just that document with the star on it.
Yeah, there's nothing like talking about parking to speed you to the bar.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm waiting for self-driving cars to come into existence, so that the way I understand that that people will stop having their own cars, and then whenever you need a car, you'll just hit an app and a car will come and pick you up.
Isn't that called Uber?
It's called an Uber, a driverless Uber.
Yeah.
Uber in Berks County is awful. It's great for when you want to get picked up to start your night, but later on, it just doesn't. When you really, really need them, they're not around that much.
Yeah,
I've
we
never-
were
I've
We were
never
up in,
taken an Uber.
we were up in Newport a couple of weekends ago, and we wanted to go over to the wharf on a Saturday night where parking is totally impossible, and called Uber and said, sorry. It's like, oh, great. Thank you.
Wow.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello,
Yes.
Najwa, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Afternoon, Najla.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
With the
Hope you had a
governor
good
taking
vacation.
with the governor taking restrictions off coming in soon, does that mean we're going to go back to in-person meetings?
Think so.
Yeah,
Wow.
there's Dan.
Oh, there's
we have
Dan.
in-person?
I saw Dan last week and I didn't recognize him. He was way too big.
That's right. You only used to see me at the little tiny square.
Right. I kept looking, go, oh, now I know who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we thought you were 1 by 3.
Exactly.
Will we go back to regular meetings, Dan?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, good.
Particularly for boroughs.
When is that?
Well, I believe that probably it will be sometime by the end of May at the latest.
No. Can
Right
we
now,
wait till the fall?
the governor's emergency declaration expires, I believe, on the 19th of May. But I just heard that he has made some other statement earlier today or yesterday that says that all restrictions will be removed by the end of May. So we have to wait to get some clarification on that. But I think either way, by the end of May, we'll be probably going back to live meetings again.
Wow. I kind of miss those really comfortable chairs around that table.
Yeah, yeah.
Bob,
I-
I don't know that when we go back to in-person, we'll be in council chambers yet. We might be using the library conference room just because it does give a little bit more space to spread out. But
Oh, okay.
like Dan said, the press release from the governor yesterday indicates the only remaining requirement as of May 31st is for masking, but it does also say municipalities may enforce stricter requirements, but it doesn't spell out what those are.
Shocking.
And we don't get a pass for a vaccine, huh?
In terms of masking,
Yeah,
once the state is at a 70% vaccination rate, which the report I read yesterday said we're at 43% complete vaccination. I think it was like 64% had at least gotten one shot. So once we're at 70% total, the mask requirement goes away.
I just think
yeah,
that's
I'm gonna
amazing.
miss it. I'm really gonna miss it.
When's the last time that I usually have about 2 colds, maybe 2.5 colds a year average. And I haven't had a cold since all this started.
It's wearing those masks, Bob.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, why give up the mask?
Yeah, the thing is, Bob, you're not supposed to drink the sanitizer.
No, it's Clorox.
Bleach, don't drink
There's
the
a lot
bleach.
to be said, there's a lot to be said for the alcohol content in the sanitizer.
Yeah, no, there is a lot of it.
There's a lot to be said for the amount of alcohol we're all consuming lately, which is hence why we're not getting sick. Our bodies have too much sanitizer inside them.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that too.
Oh.
So we're waiting for the applicant.
Believe she's online. I don't think she's turned on her video.
There's,
No, Michelle's here.
You can't see me?
I can see you.
I can see.
Okay.
Hey, Nicole,
I can't, but that's okay.
I can see you too, Jim.
Jim,
I can see me.
you know what? You have to widen your screen. I mean, if you drag and pull and
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
I think Nicole was the first one on, so I think she's at the top.
Great.
if you scroll down, Jim, can you see me?
Can switch to gallery view and then at least on my screen, everybody is like.
Yeah, I can see when I scroll down. There we go.
A lot of people here today.
okay, I guess I pushed the wrong button on mine, but I'll get it back.
David, it's really nice to have you back. That way you can read this whole thing.
I see we also have Mr. Mooney joining us. Mr. Mooney, who are you representing today?
I represent no one. I'm just an interested observer and I will not be talking.
Okay.
I have the next hearing.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you do.
All right, are we ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I actually have to put that that document someplace so that I can read it without breaking my neck. All right, we're going to call the meeting of the Wyomissing Zoning Hearing Board to order. We're here today to hear from Mr. James Gavin on behalf of his client, XLCDC Development, LLC, equitable owner of property located at 1119 Bern Road, condominium unit 3A, and identified.
Yeah, excuse me for 1 second. Can I ask everybody to mute? We're getting a lot of feedback. If everybody else could please mute until you're called on to talk.
Okay,
Okay, please go forward.
condominium unit 3A and identified as tax parcel ID number 96-4397-20-80-447 1C03 is requesting a variance from section 512 uses permitted by right and section 609 off-street parking requirements from the Borough of Wyomissing zoning. As Robert noted, there's page and page and page of this, and it is part of the record, so I'm not going to read through all of that and exercise my voice. I think in the cliff notes are that we have another issue in the Wyomissing. Yes, I keep forgetting. The Wyomissing, what is it? The Wyomissing Park. We're going to hear from the applicant on his request for variances from off-street parking, and that's 509. And what's the other one? Off-street parking. What's the other one, Dan? 512 uses permitted by right. I'm sorry. Okay,
So
I'm stumbling through this.
Right.
So, Dan, you want to explain how we're going to put this together, please?
Sure, absolutely. So I do see there are a number of people that are attending today's hearing. That means that what we want to do is make sure everybody fully understands the rules of how this is going to work today. First and foremost, I want to make sure that everybody understands that unless you're speaking, I ask that you remain muted. Otherwise, we'll end up with a lot of feedback and it'll become much more difficult. We'll make sure that everybody has the opportunity to say what they need to say. Today, the burden of proof is on the applicant. The applicant is represented by Mr. Gavin. The applicant, through their attorney, will have the opportunity to present evidence through documents and witnesses to establish the reasons why the board should grant the relief that's being requested. At the conclusion of each witness testimony, the board members and other members of the public may have the opportunity to ask questions, and that's for asking questions. After all the applicant's witnesses have been provided, if there is anybody who's going to ask for party status, and I believe there may be in this particular instance, I do see that the adjoining property owners here, and I know they've been involved with other hearings relating to this in the past, they will also have the opportunity to present witnesses and documents. And again, the same procedure will be followed where the board members and members of the public will have the opportunity to ask questions of them as well. At the conclusion of all testimony, the board will recess, go into an executive session, and typically they'll render an oral decision the same day. We do have 45 days, however, in which to do so. Does anybody have any questions about how we're going to proceed with the hearing today? Okay, I don't see anybody. Oh, Mr. Gavin, I see you starting to say something.
I was simply going to say on behalf of the applicant, I have no questions.
Oh, good, excellent. Thank you very much. And I'll ask just the other attorneys in the room if they do. Nicole, are you clear on how we're going to run the hearing?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Mooney, you said you're just waiting at this point. You are not participating in this hearing. You're waiting for the next hearing. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, with that said, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, Mr. Gavin, we'll open with you. Would you have your witnesses sworn? And Michelle, would you be sworn in at the same time, please?
Okay, I'm going to have 3 witnesses today: Michelle Farrand, Jeff Garner, and Franklin Watts, all to be sworn in.
Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give today shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gavin, please
Thank
proceed.
you. We would call Ms. Farrand as our first witness. Ms. Farrand, are you prepared to proceed?
Yes, I am.
Would you please tell the board your name?
It's Michelle Farrand.
I apologize for mispronouncing
No, that's fine.
your
They
last name.
both work.
Okay. Ma'am, what is your relationship to the applicant in this case, XLCDC Development LLC?
I'm the sole member.
And obviously then you are here to speak on behalf of that entity, is that right?
That's correct.
So for the purposes of today's hearing, the property at issue is a condominium unit.
Excuse me, Jim, just for 1 minute. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Can everybody please make sure they're muted? I think, Melissa, maybe it's yours. You're giving me the feedback. you want to try again here, Jim?
Sure. We were beginning, ma'am, to talk about the property. As I understand it, is a condominium unit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what condominium unit is it, ma'am?
It's located at 1119 Bern Drive in Wyomissing,
And do you recall what zoning district the property is in?
Yes, it's a C2.
Now, does XLCDC development? I'm still getting feedback, Dan, are you?
I see it. I think the only person that's not muted is Melissa. I don't know if she's maybe not present at the moment.
My observation is that Michelle is having the feedback.
Oh, that's really weird. Okay, I'll just mute when I'm not speaking then.
Okay, then. Thank you, sir. All right. Is XLCDC an equitable owner of the property, ma'am? Michelle, go ahead.
Yes,
And as part of the application to the borough was the written agreement of sale submitted to the borough.
that's correct.
Now, how is the property currently being used?
It's my understanding that the property is primarily being used as a gym.
Okay. And do you know how many square feet you're getting, ma'am?
Yes, it's just a little under 23,000 square feet.
According to the documents that were submitted to the borough, it's 22,972 square feet.
Yeah, that's correct.
Now, has XLCDC retained a contractor to help remodel the interior of the structure for its proposed use?
Yes, we have.
And who is that?
Dolan Construction.
And is Mr. Garner here today to participate in this hearing to help the board understand the remodel plans?
I see him, yes.
Okay. So let's talk generally now about how XLCDC proposes to use the property. Can you please describe that?
Yeah, so there's essentially there's three uses that we're looking at. The first is we would be looking to relocate Brute Athletic Apparel, which is currently located in Sinking Springs, to the facility. The second one is we would be looking to lease some office space to some professional services. And the third, it would be used as an athletic training facility.
Okay, so let's go back to Brute Athletic Apparel. What is your relationship with Brute Athletic Apparel?
I'm the president and owner of the company.
Okay, and what does Brute Athletic Apparel do, ma'am?
So Brute Athletic Apparel basically assembles athletic apparel for team sports.
To the extent that the use were permitted, what hours would a Brute Athletic operate at the site?
I would operate from, it's Monday to Friday from 6 to 5 p.m.
Okay. And do you know what, how many employees you anticipate for that use?
So yeah, 20 at full staff, we're at 25 employees.
And in terms of the space that you're purchasing, how much is going to be dedicated to this use, ma'am?
11,661 square feet.
Is there anything else about the Brute Athletic Apparel use that you would like to tell the board at this time?
No, not unless they have any questions.
All right. And I'm sure they may. So let's move on now to the office space use. Would you tell the board what you propose to do for the office space use?
Yeah, so the office space use is really basically offices for lease to professional services. So as an example, we have an affiliation with our insurance company. They've expressed an interest in leasing some of the space. Another firm we deal with, an investment advisor, is also looking for space. So they're interested in potentially having space in this location.
And again, what do you anticipate the hours of operation would be for the office space?
It would be Monday to Friday from 8 to 5.
And how many employees do you believe would be using that space?
15 approximately 15.
And then how much square footage is dedicated to that use?
2,280 square feet.
And then the final use that you've identified as an athletic training use. Can you describe that for the board, please?
Yeah, so the idea behind that is to really bring athletes in to create awareness of our sports apparel brand. And ultimately, if you look at it, it's more of a one-on-one type training, personal training, maybe with the odd camp or two, temporary camps. And it's really focused. It's going to be focused on having some wrestling mats, which wrestling is one of our largest sports, basketball, and then ultimately some of the combat sports.
So before we bring Mr. Garner in and then ultimately Mr. Watts, I want to talk generally about these uses. And do you believe the uses you're proposing would adversely affect the character of the neighborhood or alter its essential character? Go ahead, ma'am.
She's muted.
Yeah.
I think Michelle, I think you are the one who's causing the feedback. So if you can mute while he's asking his questions, it probably will be helpful.
Michelle,
Let me just ask this. Does she have two devices on at one time? Because two devices will cause that
Yes,
feedback.
exactly.
So if she's
There are
got
two
two
devices.
devices, shut one of them off.
Correct.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The question was, do you believe that the uses that you're proposing would adversely impact the neighborhood where the property is located?
No.
Do you think it's consistent with the other uses that are located on one, the industrial park property, and number two, the neighboring property?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think the way that you have designed this property is consistent with the general health and welfare and safety of the community?
Yes.
And with that, ma'am, I'm going to turn this over ultimately to Mr. Garner, but others may have. Mr. Becker, you're on mute.
Yep, I got it. All right, at this point, then we're looking to see if any of the board members, and I see Mr. Rothmel was just speaking a moment ago, if any of the board members have any questions for the applicant.
We forget our mutes and keep talking. Are there any questions from the board? I don't see anything.
I don't have anything.
Mr. Gavin, are we going to, is Michelle the complete description of the businesses that are going to be there? The other witnesses have nothing to do with that.
You're muted, Jim.
What a silly process we have. Mr. Garner is going to testify to the interior layout that's being proposed, so you have an understanding of that. And then Mr. Watts is going to testify to the parking issues.
Okay, well, we can get back to a number of employees then if there's still some questions after that. Okay, fine. Any reason, Nicole, do you have any questions at this point?
I have a couple questions, if I may.
Please.
You said Farrand? Pronounce your last name, Ms.
Yes.
Farrand?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Farrand, do you currently have leases in place for the professional services you testified about?
I do not.
So that's just a guess or a desire at this time?
We've had active discussions as it relates to people's interest in coming onto the property with us, but until the deal is finalized, then we have not pursued, actual leases.
Okay, so the leases could end up being something different than professional office space, and the number of employees could be greater.
I mean, the space that's allotted, the 2,280 square feet, is really going to govern how many people would be able to occupy that space.
How about with regard to the athletic training? how many invitees do you anticipate at one time?
Yeah, so it's basically more of a one-on-one type of training. So the facility, I mean, the 3,600 square feet that would be allotted to it technically would, not allow very many people at one time. So as an example, on the wrestling mats, I mean, you can only have a few wrestlers at a time. The basketball nets that we anticipate putting in place are not, they're not a full court. So it's essentially more of a skills training facility.
Understand, but how many do you anticipate?
20.
So 20 invitees at one time plus the 20 employees at one time.
No, so I think that's a miscommunication. It would be 20 total in the facility at that time. There would not be 20 employees in that period of time.
Because your application states number of employees for the athletic training, 20.
Yeah, I understand, but I mean, that was intended to be the amount of people training in the facility at that time.
So how many employees then do you anticipate for those 20 one-on-one training sessions?
I don't anticipate any employees because the 20 includes the people training the athletes.
Okay, so it's 10 athletes and 10 trainers at one time.
Well, I mean, one trainer could technically train more than one athlete.
So it was not really one-on-one then. I mean, I'm just trying to figure this out because you said it was one-on-one.
Well, I mean, like generally speaking, it was the way I phrased it, but ultimately it's small groups of people being trained more like personal or semi-personal type training facility.
And just to your application states hours of operation for Brute Athletic to be 6 a.m. to 5 p.m.
That's correct.
And for the office space, 8 a.m. to 5 a.m. But yet you don't, even though you don't have leases, but you anticipate that.
Correct. 8 to 5 p.m.
And then the athletic training is 3 p.m. to 10 p.m.
That's correct.
Okay, no further questions.
Dan, do you have anything?
Just one follow-up as it relates to those last series of questions from Nicole. So I just want to make sure I'm clear. The maximum number that you're going to have in the athletic portion facility will be 20 total, which includes trainers and trainees. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what we anticipate, correct.
Okay, that's the maximum that you're going to have. Is that?
Yeah, that's what we anticipate.
Okay.
Mr. Gavin?
You're muted, Jim.
This is why I didn't go to law, why I went to law school and not computer school. I have no other questions for this witness. We would like to call Mr. Garner at this time.
Okay.
And to Ms. Baer, if you could give us the plan by Dolan Construction that was submitted with the application.
It's actually Melissa that's running the visuals, but I'm sure she's happy to do that for you.
Hi, Melissa. Mr. Garner, are you on? There you are. I saw you. Sir, would you please, you've been sworn, so would you please state for the board your name, sir?
Jeffrey Garner.
And what do you do for a living, sir?
I'm the project manager for Dolan Construction.
Okay, and has Dolan Construction been engaged by XLCDC Development for the purpose of the project that we've been discussing so far today?
Yes, we have.
And will you be serving as the project manager for this property?
Yes, I will.
And have you come today prepared to discuss your plans?
Yes.
And generally, can you tell the board about your education and training?
I have an associate degree from Thaddeus Stevens School of Technology. I've been in the industry over 25 years, as a 15 years as a project manager.
As part of your work on this project, sir, have you been to the site?
Yes.
And have you walked through it?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell the building or describe, I'm sorry, can you describe for the board the condominium unit that is the subject of this application that's going to be remodeled?
Currently, they're looking to take the space of the Gold's Gym, which right now is broke into, I would say, like 3 quadrants. You have your open area for your gym, your training facilities, and then you have your, your public areas, which would be your restrooms and your reception area.
And have you prepared a plan that was submitted with the zoning application and is on the screen right now? Have you prepared that?
Yes, we did.
And would you please describe for the board what that plan is?
Basically, what you'll see, we're planning to keep the reception area as is when you come into the building. And then we will section off part of the main open gym area to create the areas for the athletic training, and then also the 2 areas or 3 areas basically for brute manufacturing. So you'll see the area behind the reception is dedicated for brutes manufacturing. The enclosed area with the double doors on the angle, that is for some of their printing equipment. And then the large section in the back is for their sewing equipment, which is kind of almost like an L shape in the back. That is going to be dedicated for brute. The middle sections are for the training.
Just hold for 1 minute. Melissa, it would be a lot easier if you can give him access to the mouse. So maybe he can help to direct us to what he's speaking about.
Sure.
Also, just before we continue, I know this plan was part of your application, Mr. Gavin, but I'd like for ease of discussion to mark it as applicant's exhibit number 1.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you have the mouse now, Mr. Garner?
I do.
Okay,
I do.
Maybe helpful as you're explaining what you're talking about.
And if I may, Mr. Becker, I'm going to help him walk through it.
That'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Gavin.
So this exhibit that's been marked as applicant's exhibit number 1, it's an exhibit that has been prepared by Dolan Construction. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And if I look at this, it's a landscape exhibit, and on the right-hand side is the information about Dolan Construction and the client, correct?
That's correct.
And this is a schematic floor plan for zoning purposes?
That's correct.
And this document seems to indicate that the existing space square footage is 22,237 square feet. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, if you look kind of in the center, but on the lower half of the page, there are a series of numbers 1 through 4. Do you see where I am, sir?
I do.
Okay. And what is number 1, sir?
It would be the leased office space.
Okay. Now, are you able to use that mouse to show the board where that leased office space is on exhibit A1?
Yes, it would be this area right here.
Okay. So the record is clear. On the top of the exhibit A1, there are a couple spaces with the number 1 located inside them. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's 2 areas. This area here, oops, and this section right here.
And that is the office space that would be available for leasing by the applicant in this case. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And now going back to the center on the bottom, next to that, you have a number 2,280 square feet. Is that right?
That's correct.
And would you explain to the board what that is?
That is the leasable space created in these 2 areas, taking into consideration the boundaries and the walls for the lease space.
Okay. So the next number 2, that appears to be for the brute apparel use. Is that right?
That is correct.
And can you show the board where within the plans the number 2s are associated with the brute use?
We would have office space in this top area right here.
And would that be on the left-hand side, sir?
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead.
And then If you come down behind the reception area, which is this area right here, that is another area. And then directly behind that is an existing room right now, which is to be used for Brute. And then off to the far end of the page is this L-shaped area right here.
Okay, so if I'm looking at the plan, it appears to me to be 6 areas on the plan that have bear the number 2, and they would be dedicated to the Brute athletic apparel use.
Jim,
That is correct.
at the moment, I see 5 that he identified. Is the one kind of right in the center? Is that also a number 2?
Oh, yes, sorry. This is 1, 2 as well, because there'd be a section off right here. That's correct. I apologize about that.
So, okay, so I see the 2 office spaces that were at the top, and then you come down to what you referred to as the reception area, and you kind of moved around so you came down towards the bottom and then towards the center and back up again. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, sir. So how much square footage is dedicated to the Brute athletic use?
11,661 square feet.
So the number 3 is associated with the athletic training. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Again, using the diagram and the number 3, can you show the board where the athletic training will take place on this plan?
It would be this area right here.
Just the one single area, is that right, sir?
That is correct.
Okay, and how much square footage is dedicated to that?
That's 3,612 square feet.
Now, the last number on the plan is number 4, and that's for common area. Would you explain that to the board?
The common areas would be your reception area and your vestibule when you first come in the door. And then with our conversation with Brute, it would be the shared areas. So it would be your restrooms, which would be, oops, sorry about that. Trying to move the page up. Okay, we'll do it this way. So it'd be your restrooms. You have an existing men and women's restrooms right now, and those would be the areas at the bottom of the page. At the bottom of the page, looking at this way, would be off to your far right, the top far right of the page.
So on the lower left-hand side, there's a number 4, appears to be some doors. Is that what you anticipate to be the main entrance, sir?
That is correct.
And that would be a common area.
Yes.
And then in the upper right-hand corner, there appear to be 2 spaces marked with number 4s. Would those be the bathrooms, sir?
Yes, men's and women's.
Okay, and other than those, do you anticipate any other common areas in the facility?
Not at this time.
And how much square feet is dedicated to those common areas?
We have 3,858 square feet.
Okay. Now, you have a total at the bottom of 21,411 square feet, but if you've indicated the existing space is 22,237, can you explain to the board why there's a slight difference there?
That's your usable space. So now we're taking into consideration walls, doors, casework. So that is your usable square footage within the space.
In terms of the overall use of this space, sir, do you consider this to be a reasonable use of this space?
I do.
And do you think it is consistent with the other uses in the area, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Now, it's my understanding you were not involved in the designing of the exterior parking. Is that correct?
That is correct. We were just for internal renovations.
All right, sir. Mr. Garner, thank you, sir. I don't have any other questions for Mr. Garner at this time.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Becker, do you have any questions?
I do, just a couple, just for clarification. The main entrance is make sure I'm clear, is at the top of the page on the left-hand side. Is that correct? Right above where it says existing parking square footage. I'm sorry, existing space square footage. I'm sorry.
That is correct. It's
Okay.
the,
All
right
right.
by the reception desk. Yep.
So there's the double doors that come into the reception area. Now
Yes.
go all the way down to the end, to the bottom of that diagram. There's something marked down there where it looks like there's also doors to the exterior.
You're talking about the existing common vestibule?
Is that what? Yes. Yeah, so what's that area?
That is a existing vestibule that is utilized for the, I believe it's the restaurant next door. I believe Michelle can probably answer better on that. It's existing, and I don't believe there's access for that for this condo based on the condo agreement. That's my understanding.
So that's not part of the included square footage that you've been discussing so far today.
That is correct.
And that's not part of the condo area.
I'd have to inquire with Michelle on that one.
Okay. All right. And the existing electrical room, that is for your for the proposed facility. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that was factored into your square footage as well?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no other questions at the time.
Nicole.
Yes, a few. I don't think we identified or discussed in between the two spaces, which were identified as number 1 office space. There appears to be a space with a number 2. Is that also part of Brute?
It is listed as part of the proposed course.
So there are actually 7 spaces for Brute.
I believe that might be a type. Give me 1 second, please.
Sorry, Jeff, it's Michelle. Should I jump in?
Yes, sure.
Well,
Yeah, so
hold on.
am I allowed? No.
Yeah,
You
wait,
can.
wait for Mr. Becker.
Yeah, but I prefer if Mr. Gavin directs the conversation. So if you would, please. Yeah.
Do you want me to direct Ms.
Just want to make
Barron?
sure that we keep in control. That's all. So if you want to just have Michelle explain, but that's up to you. I want you to make sure that you're controlling the
Okay, that's fine.
testimony.
What I think I would prefer, Michelle, is to let Mr. Garner finish, and then we'll put you back on the stand to address the issue that you want to address.
Perfect. Thank you.
And Mr. Garner, if you're unable to answer Attorney Plank's question, you should simply state that.
Yes, I would like Michelle to answer that question, please.
Okay. So you don't know if that space was calculated in your square footage totals for Brute?
Not 100% sure at this time, because I know we had gone back and forth between Brute and the common areas on that for that specific section right there.
Do
I
you
believe
know
it
if
is-
that, I apologize, please continue.
I believe it is included in Brutes because we have the number on there because we went back and forth to design on the plans. So I believe it is included with Brute, but I can verify that.
But is it your testimony that it is somehow included in the total square footage? It's not missing square footage?
Yes, it is including the total square footage. That is correct. I can testify to that.
Thank you. With regard to the parking, there's no testimony from you with regard to calculations on parking. Do you know how many parking spaces are needed for with using the literal reading of the Wyomissing zoning ordinance for this space?
I cannot answer that question at this time. I don't have that knowledge.
So you have no clue the parking requirements for this space?
We were not contracted to work on the parking.
No further questions.
Any further questions, board? Okay, Mr. Gavin?
Thank you. Let's go back to Ms. Farren if we can. Ms. Farren, you wanted to add something during Mr. Garner's testimony.
I don't think it's necessary at this point, unless there's any further questions for me specifically on that use of that space.
All right, well, let's just get clarification then, Ms. Farren. The piece of, the area of the building that was being discussed was between the two office spaces.
Uh-huh.
Is that space part of Brute, or is that space part of the common area?
It's part of Brute.
Okay, so I think that, and that was part of the calculation for the square footage that was included with the numbers for Brute, which, put my glasses back on here again, I think with testimony was 11,661 square feet. Is that right?
I believe so, because it's all of the number twos were added up to the 11,661. It was always intended, that space was always intended to be used for Brute.
Thank you.
And we're all clear on that point?
I have no further questions of Ms. Farren at this time.
Okay. Please proceed, Mr. Gavin.
At this time, we would call Mr. Watts. Mr. Watts, are you prepared to testify, sir?
I am, yes.
Okay. Now for this, we're going to use the parking plan that was submitted with the application and consistent with Mr. Becker's direction. I believe it should be marked as applicant's exhibit number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Gavin.
So, Mr. Watts, you've testified before this board before.
I have, yes.
You've testified regarding all of the real estate at the Wyomissing Industrial Complex, correct?
That's correct.
And you are the person that prepared the parking plan for the property, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Could you tell the board, although they've known you before, what you do for a living, sir?
Yes, I'm a registered architect, and I'm also a project manager for a construction company in the area.
And have you come today to discuss the work that you performed designing the parking on this property and any opinions or conclusions that you have?
Yes, sir.
So can you tell the board about the plan that you have created for the parking for this property?
Objection, is he qualifying him as an expert?
I will if you would like me to.
I'd like you to, please. If he's gonna be testifying as an expert, I'd like him qualified as an expert.
Okay,
Gavin, why don't you take him through the process?
sure. Mr. Watts, would you please explain to the board your educational background, sir?
So I have a Bachelor of Architecture degree from Philadelphia University. I've been a registered architect in the state of Pennsylvania since 2005. I'm a member of the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, as well as a member of the International Building Council.
Okay, and have you testified as an expert in the field of architecture in the past?
I have, yes.
Have you testified before this board as an expert in the field of architecture in the past?
I have, yes.
Have you testified before the board as an expert with regard to this particular piece of real estate in the past?
I have, yes.
I would offer Mr. Watts as an expert in the field of architecture.
Now, speaking for the board, I think we'll accept that he is an expert.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Watts, let's get back to the property itself. Can you generally describe the overall property at the industrial park?
Sure. I mean, this parking issue has come up before. It's a very odd shaped property. It's filled with former industrial buildings that have been repurposed over the years a number of times. It's home to multiple condo owners and users. The works. Laser Quest was in one of the recent buildings. They're no longer there. There's a tanning salon. The Marines have a section of the building. Chima is another one of the properties, and obviously the space that we're looking at right now has been known as Gold's Gym. With the number of parking spaces that are available to all of these condo owners over the years, they've come to an agreement on when those parking spaces would be made available to them, and therefore we created a parking matrix to handle the number of parking spaces that would be needed by each one of those building owners at their peak needs.
And the parking matrix, is that reflected in this exhibit A2?
It is, it would be, it's not on the screen right now, but it would be in the bottom right hand of that sheet.
And in terms of this particular property, can you, using that exhibit, describe for the board how the property is accessed, ingress and egress, please?
Sure. The main entrances for this property are both off of Bern Road. One is directly at the bottom of the sheet there. It's right across from the post office. And then there are two other entrances on the upper branch of Bern Road there across from Russo's.
Okay. And based upon the proposed uses of this property, have you made a determination of the number of parking spaces that are needed, sir?
We have.
And can you tell the board what that is?
Actually, if I could just clarify, Jim, are you asking for this particular building or for the entire property?
Are you able to answer both of those questions, sir?
The latter is a much more difficult one, obviously. Because of the number of buildings and types, there's a different parking calculation that applies to each one of those uses. I do not have the exact number in front of me, but I know if we were to do it exactly by the zoning ordinance, we're well over 1,000 parking spaces, which is nowhere close to what would actually be needed for the types of buildings and the occupants that we have there. There are 463 spaces available on this property, and those are spaces that are shared by the condo owners.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's my understanding that the applicant's proposed uses in this case is actually less intensive than what was there previously?
That's correct. I mean, there were in the current parking matrix, there are 63 spaces that are allotted to Gold's Gym. Their needs over the years have averaged approximately 50 spaces, so they always had a few more than what they actually needed during their peak times. And our understanding is that the current applicant is going to be needing far less than that, based on the number of people that they're expecting in the building at any given time.
Okay, and do you know what that number is, sir?
Based on and again, just supporting Michelle's testimony before, with the number of staff being approximately 20 during the day, that number can fluctuate between 20 and 30, depending on how many tenants they end up with. And then in the evening hours with their training, approximately 20 people. So they're not happening at the same time. And that certainly falls within the realms of the parking matrix as it relates to other tenants and other condo owners.
Okay. So do you believe that the use in this case and the parking would adversely impact the character of the neighborhood?
I don't believe it would adversely affect. I believe it's a good fit for this community.
Okay. And do you believe the property is laid out in such a way that these uses can be achieved safely?
Yes, sir.
So the main variance that you're focusing on is the off-street parking. I think you've testified a little bit about what the ordinance would require, which would be quite a large number of parking spaces. And we're seeking relief, obviously, for substantially less than that. Is that correct?
That's correct. The way the zoning ordinance is written, and again, there's a few areas that this could fall into because there's different uses that are happening. If you were to do a calculation just for this particular building, it would be around 100, 115 spaces, and we do not need that based on the occupant load for the building.
Okay. And you do not have that due to the size and shape of the property. Is that correct?
That's correct. Although I would say that during their hours of operation, there are more than adequate number of spaces available to them during their operating hours.
Okay. And do you believe, sir, that the property can be developed in strict conformity with the zoning ordinance?
No, I do not.
And do you believe that if the board were to grant the parking variance requested in this case, that would be the minimum variance that would afford relief?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, sir, that you believe the board needs to know about this application?
Not at this time, no.
I have no further questions at this moment.
Becker, members of the board?
No.
Go ahead, Dan,
I
please.
think I want to wait till after Nicole asks any questions.
Okay. Nicole, please.
Thank you. Mr. Watts, how many parking studies have you personally performed?
On this particular property, I've performed a number of parking studies in just terms of how many parking spaces are needed for the property. I've worked with, dozens of clients over the years on theirs.
So you've performed dozens of parking studies?
It depends on how you define a parking study. If you're talking about the number of parking spaces as it relates to a zoning ordinance, I have performed several dozen of those. I know there have been questions in the past about traffic studies. I have not done those myself.
So have you ever performed a parking study for this property where you've actually counted the number of cars coming in and out on various times and various days to determine usage?
If that's how you're determining a parking study, I have not done that.
So with regard to this property, all you've ever done is gone out and count
That's correct.
where things are sort of striped?
That's correct.
At our previous hearing, just a couple weeks ago, you testified that there were 454 parking spaces. Now you're testifying there's 463. Can
No,
you
I believe-
point out where the additional 9 came from?
No, I've always testified to 463, and that's what's presented on the parking matrix. I believe your number is mixed up. The 454 is what the works would need at their peak hours of operation, but 463 spaces is what's reflected on the exhibit.
So the works would need 454 at peak, and there's only 463 available for everybody.
That's correct.
There are other spaces on this, as part of this condominium complex. There's other areas, strike that. There are other areas of this condominium complex that could be utilized as parking, correct?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. If you're talking about indoor parking, that's been a discussion with certain condo owners, but I'm not aware of any other I'm not aware of any other open property on this complex that could be developed to create parking.
But there's quite a bit of open space that could be within the condominium buildings themselves that could be created into parking, correct?
That is something that has been considered, yes.
Could it be done?
Yes,
And at one time, there were leases in place for an additional 173 spaces that were terminated by the condominium owners, correct?
that's
I'm gonna
my,
object to that question, that there's no indication that my client had leases or control of any leases, and therefore I don't think that question is relevant to my client.
Nicole, why don't you try to rephrase the question?
I'm not even sure how to rephrase the question. The question is this witness aware, he's the parking expert, aware that there were leases in the past for 173 spaces? This condo unit,
I think that's a fair question, Nicole. I think that's,
thank you.
Mr. Watts, can you answer that question?
I am aware that there were leases to rent other properties in the past, yes.
Just give me 2 seconds. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else I'd like to ask. Your test, just one additional question. You testified that there's the actual literal reading of the Wyomissing zoning ordinance would need over 1,000 parking spaces, correct?
That's correct.
If I remember Ms. Baer's testimony with regard to this property, her testimony was the actual number was 1,926. Do you remember that testimony?
I do remember the testimony. I don't have the number in front of me, but that sounds about right.
And where in the Wyomissing zoning ordinance does it permit for peak and off-peak to be considered in a parking variance request or application?
I don't know that in the previous zoning applications there is that permission, which is why we always went for a variance request.
But do you know where it's located in the actual zoning ordinance?
Off the top of my head, I do not.
Do you even know if it exists?
I don't believe it exists. That's something that we've always had to go in for a variance for this property.
No further questions.
Any further questions, Dan?
I just want to make sure I understand a couple of things that Mr. Watts previously testified to. You made a comment a moment ago that dealing with 115 spaces. What was that referencing? Is that what it would be based upon square footage?
Correct. The zoning ordinance for Wyomissing deals with a lot of these buildings in square footage calculations when it comes to determining the number of parking spaces for a building. So with a building like this, you've got multiple uses in there. So you have office space, you have storage space, you have some areas that might be considered health fitness. And so there's different numbers that would accumulate that between 200, 250 square feet. Storage off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what that calculation is. But if you used a 200 square foot number for the square footage for this particular building, that puts you around 115 spaces that would be required if you went by the zoning ordinance.
Okay. And the total number of spaces that are being dedicated to this particular condo unit are how many?
The way the parking matrix is currently set up with the condo associates is 63 spaces.
And based upon, I just want to get right to the point. Based upon the three uses that are being proposed, what are the total number of spaces when you use those particular parking regulations to come up with spaces that are required? What are the number of spaces?
Again, I think it does depend on what those tenant spaces become, but ultimately we were looking in the range of 30 to 40 spaces that would be needed at their peak.
Why such a big range, Frank?
Again, because I'm not real familiar with the tenant spaces that they're proposing. It sounds like they just have, offices are going to be coming in there, but it's based on the number of occupants total.
The number of employees that would take those spaces.
Correct, right. And it's not something that we looked at very closely because it is a less intense use than what's currently there with Gold's Gym.
And how many spaces? I thought you said Gold's Gym was allocated 63 spaces.
That's correct.
And that's what you're telling me, that they're only going to need up to 40. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. But do you recall the total number of spaces for the entire complex that you looked at before?
463.
No, I'm talking, that's what's available. What was required when you did the analysis previously? By the zoning ordinance, required by the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, again, that's the one I didn't have written down. I believe the testimony from Michelle before was roughly 1,900 spaces. And I don't believe that's incorrect. I believe that's the right number.
All right. Now, also, just to make sure that I'm clear too, on the A2, the exhibit that's up on the screen,
yes.
The area that we're talking about is marked as Gold's Gym, right? I see that. It says building number 24, I think. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. To the left of that, right where the hand has been waving, to the left of that, there's a small box. Is that part of the, up a little bit, move that X up? There you go, right in there. Is that part of that unit as well or not?
I believe it is, yes.
Are there any spaces that are specifically allocated to this use, or is it just a general for first come, first serve, any space within the parking lot based upon the condo unit?
It is. At one time, we tried to do it where, certain spaces were allocated, but it was very difficult to do that. So it's really just first come, first serve.
Okay. And what happens when the works is in session and your office is still open, and there was a total of 463 spaces available? Isn't, I think that's the right number, right? And the works needs 454. What happens then with for the parking for Brute and its employees?
Right, and that's why we believe this is a good fit for the property, because Brood is going to be utilizing that space during the daytime when the works is nowhere close to being at capacity. The works peak hours tend to be that Friday into the weekend hours in the evening. And so, toward the end of the day on a Friday when Brood is exiting, obviously those spaces aren't going to be available to the works customers until after they leave, just because they've been there for the day. So we don't anticipate that being a conflict for Brood and their staff.
Okay. And how about the 2 hours of overlap between the athletic facilities and the, I think you said that they start at 3 o'clock and Brute doesn't close until 5 o'clock. How do you accommodate that overlap of the 20 additional spaces?
Again, just based on history on this site, there are going to be some times of the year that we're going to see that parking lot fuller than normal, but we do not anticipate, we anticipate that to be a rare occasion in terms of the conflict with Brute.
All right, that's all the questions I have, unless that's generated any further questions.
Just two, if I may. I'm sorry, Attorney Gavin.
Mr. Becker, if I may, just want to redirect on the one issue raised by Ms. Plank. Mr. Watts, there were questions about leases. To the best, did you ever see those leases yourself, sir?
In terms of the adjacent properties with the parking?
Yes, sir.
I did not.
Okay, you're aware that other condominium unit owners had leases for space, is that correct?
That's correct.
This applicant does not have any leases for parking spaces and never did.
That's correct, to the best of my knowledge.
All right, thank you, sir. That's all I have, Mr. Becker.
Thank you. Ms. Plank, do you have any further cross-examination?
Just three questions now. Number one, Mr. Watts, you're aware that the property owner is Zenith Properties, correct?
I believe the current property owner is Zenith Properties, yes.
And that was one of the individuals, I'm sorry, one of the entities that had a lease for the 93 spaces, correct?
Correct.
Have you ever been over to this parking lot and observed the number of cars at any given time and calculated those to back up the testimony that you've given today?
I visit this property on a regular basis with my family. I live in the borough. I drive past this property multiple times a week, many times on the weekend. I have seen the parking lot full. I've never seen it to the point where people were spilling out into the street. I have not witnessed them parking on adjacent properties, to my knowledge, again, with what I've seen. And I myself have never had a problem parking there whenever I visited the facility on a weekend.
Have you ever calculated the number of cars in the parking lot at various times of the day on various days?
I have not.
Just give me 2 seconds. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Rothman.
I have to ask a question in general, I think of the board. Are we all clear on exactly how many people are going to be employed and the people load in this building? Was that the testimony was a bit confusing to me. Are we all have a good understanding of that? If we do, we can move on.
I believe, Mr. Rothwell, the testimony's been that they don't know, because they don't know who's the tenant's going to be at the moment.
Okay.
My understanding, it was going to be over 20 because they're going to have 20 in the training area.
So let's just get clarification through Mr. Gavin and his witnesses. Mr. Gavin, you heard the concern of the board at the moment, which is they're looking for clarification on the number of employees, I think particularly in the office space use. Can you provide us any other clarification or limitations on that particular issue?
What I can say, and if need be, we can have Ms. Farrand clarify this a little bit to the extent she can, is again, there's three uses. The brute use is the assembly of the apparel.
And Mr. Gavin, let me stop you there for a second. Let's just talk about that. I believe in your application, you did provide some information about that particular use and the number of people. Is that correct?
We did. We did.
That number is a firm number. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So to answer the board's question, Mr. Rothmel, I think that that has been provided in testimony and in as part of their application.
And that number is
25.
25. Okay.
25. Moving on to the office space use, as Ms. Farren indicated, that space, the end user of that space has not yet been identified. But what has been identified is the space itself, which they're currently modeled out at 2,280 square feet. So based upon that square footage, they have anticipated that there can have no more than 15 employees there. So that's where that answer comes from.
Okay.
The athletic training facility is kind of partially the way the application is set up. We identified it as 20 employees, but I think what Ms. Farren's testimony was, she does not anticipate there would ever be a time that there are more than 20 people in the facility between employees and clientele. And I could defer to Ms. Farren. Is that what your testimony was, ma'am?
That's correct.
If I may just follow up on that, I just want to make sure we're clear because there is going to be some overlap. So are you talking about employees of Brute as well as the trainers and the people being trained? Or are you saying it's just the trainers and trainees up to 20?
When we're talking about the athletic training facility, that would not include any Brute employees. So that would include the trainers and athletes.
Okay, so between 3 and 5, there is a possibility that there would all be there together. Is that correct?
Ultimately, I would be very surprised. 3 o'clock would be kids are just getting out of school at that time. I think the peak times for that facility are going to be more like 5 to 10 o'clock, but ultimately they could start sooner than 3. So I guess technically you could say yes, but ideally that's not going to be the case.
Okay. Mr. Rothwell, does that answer your question sufficiently?
It does with this clarification. We have 25 Brute employees. We could potentially have up to 15 office employees. So we're at 40, and we could conceivably overlap with 20 children and trainers. So you have a total of 65 as the worst case. Am I doing that fairly?
That's correct.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you. I needed that. All right, Mr. Gavin, where are we?
I'm in Wyomissing. You?
You couldn't resist that, could you?
No, but thank you anyway. In terms of witnesses, we have no further witnesses. I would indicate for the board, and we can have marked as Exhibit A3 to the extent necessary. One of the issues that has been discussed with regard to this application and other applications was whether there would be an amendment to the condominium declaration relating to parking. That was done and that was submitted to the borough yesterday. And I believe Ms. Baer has that and has made that part of the packet. I think the document speaks for itself ultimately.
Okay, so you want to mark that as applicant's exhibit number 3?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll mark that as 3. The time is now 4:07. I know that, Nicole, you may have some witnesses as well. To the board, do we want to continue this hearing or do we want to continue moving forward? Remember, we do have another hearing that was scheduled to commence at 4 o'clock.
I don't know where we are in as far as our overall time and whether there are any stops on that. Does it make sense if we could to continue to complete this hearing and ask for continuance on the hearing that's following?
Potentially, but let me ask this question first. Nicole, how much time do you think you will need?
I just have Kevin and Michelle there. So probably 30 minutes.
All right. Now I see so it's your preference, Mr. Rothmel, that you would like to complete this hearing and see if we can move the other hearing to another date. Is that correct?
Continue it at another date. Yes, please.
Mr. Mooney, I see that you're on the line here right now, and I know that you're the attorney for the second applicant. Do you have any concerns or problems with taking that approach? You're muted, Keith. Keith, you're muted.
I mean, my client would like to hold the hearing as soon as possible. I understand that what happens in this hearing may have a bearing on my hearing, which is why obviously I was intently listening in. But we do have depending on what the decision in our hearing is, we do have a tenant who would like to move in at some point. So, I mean, I understand if you got to move it from today. I assume what you would do is open my hearing after this one is over and then continue it that way.
That's exactly what we would do, so we could avoid re-advertising the costs associated with it. We would announce the date for the continued hearing. We would have to take a recess and do that. Before we go that route, are you amenable to that? If not, what we'll do is we'll just continue this hearing to another date.
I mean, I'd like to get the input from my client. Do we know how far out we would go, I guess is the question.
All right, let's do this. Let's go off the record here for a moment, and let's see if we can find a date, because it looks like either way we're going to need another date for one or both of these hearings.
That's correct.
So let's take a look at our schedules and try to see if we can't find a date for that purpose.
Mr. Becker, may I ask, does the board have a hard stop today?
Michelle?
For Melissa and I's sake, because it's been a very long day already, I would request respectfully we go no later than 5:30 p.m.
There you have it. So we have we have about another hour and 20 minutes max. So let's take a look at the calendars right now. It looks like we're going to probably still need another date. So let's just take a look at those while we're talking.
Knowing my schedule and Melissa's schedule for other meetings, next, well, keep in mind, we have zoning hearings scheduled for next Wednesday. You could put yourself in for a very long afternoon and put this one at maybe 1:30 on the 12th, or otherwise I would say Monday the 10th or Thursday the 13th in the afternoon, unless Melissa has something I'm not aware of are open.
Thursday, I could do the afternoon on the 13th.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not available on the 13th.
I'm not available.
If everybody's open on Monday the 10th, I am wide open on Monday the 10th.
Yeah, I'm not open on the 10th either.
Okay.
What about making an afternoon of the 12th?
So we have two other hearings scheduled starting at 3 o'clock. Yeah, so I'm available on that date if we would start somewhere, and frankly, we maybe should, in the morning, maybe something like 10 o'clock.
I can, but I have a hard stop at 12 for another meeting.
And I have police contract negotiations for another municipality at 9 a.m. on the 12th.
So that takes.
So I couldn't be the first.
Okay, so that takes me then out to the 14th, Friday the 14th.
That's open for me.
That is open for me.
I cannot make clear, Dan, on kind of where we are yet. So
what time is this?
14th as well.
What time on the 14th?
I'm available anytime after. So just after like 9 o'clock. Make it 10 o'clock just to avoid travel time.
I am out of the state.
I'm not available in the morning, and I would only be available Friday after 2.
Sounds like Kevin's not available that day.
Evan, would you be able to do Zoom from your location?
The afternoon, if I maybe like knocks me out of the box, I have oral surgery scheduled at 1:30.
Would you rather be here?
Yeah,
I would rather be there.
All right, how about Tuesday the 18th?
That's a bad day for Melissa and I.
Okay.
I anticipate being busy that day, Mr. Becker.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, at the primary.
You might be. I think you might be. All right. That takes me down to Monday, May 24th. And that
I'm
would
not
be,
available between the 20th and oh geez.
Yeah, I'm out.
Until the 8th.
Yeah, I'm out the 22nd to 29th as well.
all right.
First day and the first day is available then would be Wednesday, June 9th.
And then I'm not going to be available to the 14th. So actually the 14th is not available. So the 15th, how about the 15th of June?
Keith,
What
is
time?
your client acceptable to that?
I don't know.
Look, it's gonna. Here's where we're gonna go. So we might be able to finish one today. We can push forward and see where we get to, but we're gonna end up continuing either both or potentially one or the other. So I think that's where we are time-wise. And it looks like we're out into June right now for the continued dates.
And board members, please keep in mind, I just got 2 more applications. So it looks like June is going to be a very busy month.
So, all right, look, at this point, it's an appointed time and place for this second hearing. I think at this point, we should just take this one and continue it to the first date we have available for Nicole to then begin her testimony with her direct examination of her witnesses. So if that's the case, then we'll start the other testimony and both of them will be moved to the new date. Anybody have any objection to that?
Just for the clarification of my own client, Mr. Becker. So what you want to do is you want to adjourn my hearing now, continue it until what looks like June 15th.
Or later.
And it's my understanding, so my client has the ability to represent to their seller, if necessary, that this is the earliest date possible available by this board. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. That is correct, based upon our review of calendars just a few moments ago, which you obviously participated in.
I did.
Board members, how do you feel about that?
With me.
So just so everybody knows, June 15th, I am going to be in North Carolina, but I am willing to do this because I know how important it is to everybody. So I would request the afternoon so I don't have to get up. I don't have to set my alarm on vacation. That's all I request.
I don't think we settled on the 15th. Yeah, I think that was
Okay.
where we ended our review. All dates prior to that seemed to come up with conflicts. So again, let's look at this, so first, let me make sure I understand. To the board members, are we going to try to continue this one and start the new hearing? Or do you prefer just push forward and move the other one back?
Would prefer to at least clean up one and before we start another.
Okay, the problem is we're having, Mr. Mooney, are you objecting to us not starting your hearing today?
I mean, I don't know that I have authorization without speaking to my client to go ahead and just agree.
That's fine. Understand, you probably will not get through your testimony today either, which means it's going to be continued anyway. We have a hard stop at 5:30.
And that was the email I was just typing to my client now saying that they have a hard stop and that if we do not finish, then we were going to be pushed out to June.
That's correct. All right, look, we've advertised the second hearing to start at 4 o'clock. We're at 4:17 right now. I think at this point, let's pick a date for the current hearing. We'll continue it out to that date. We end it in June. Does June 15th work for the board members?
June 15th in the afternoon does work for me.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Najla?
Yeah, I'm free June 15.
Okay, so.
And Mr. Becker, I need to hear from my client on the availability of that date.
Well,
I understand.
I think what we're going to do, Jim, is at this point, and I'd be happy to try to accommodate any way I can. However, at this point, we need to get a date scheduled so that we can make that announcement for hearing. Obviously, we have certain requirements under the MPC in terms of the number of hearings,
Understood.
number of hours. So I hope that you can. That's the first date we have available, so I want to try to get it scheduled. So
I'm available.
thank you.
Michelle, are you available?
I'm available.
Okay, so
We're
the
good.
15th, how long do you think, Michelle, sorry, Nicole, you said you have about a half hour, you believe. So why don't we schedule this for, why don't we do it for 2 o'clock
On the 15th.
on the 15th? Okay,
Can you hear this?
what we'll do is we'll put this on the record. Right now, we're still off the record, so,
15th at 2 o'clock.
right. And that's for the current hearing, which is for XLCDC Development LLC. All right, so let's go back on the record. We will put that continuance on the record. And at that point in time, Ms. Plank, you be prepared to conduct your direct examination of your witnesses.
Yes.
Okay, let's go back on the record.
All right. Back in the record, the agreement among the parties that will continue the current hearing until June 15th at 2 o'clock.
Mr. Gavin, do you agree to that?
I agree to that and just want to state for the record that we're agreeing to it based upon the board's assertion that that is the earliest possible date available to reconvene this hearing.
I believe that's a fair assertion.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Gavin.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Blank, you also and your client agree to that extension.
Yes, reluctantly, but yes.
Thank you very much. All right, at this point then, we'll stand in recess until Tuesday, June 15th at 2 p.m. Thank
Right,
you very much.
Mr. Becker, my client and I and our witnesses are going to be leaving this meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gavin.
Thank you very
Your
much.
Witnesses as well.
Okay.
Michelle, I'll call you.
Okay. We're
Dan,
good.
are we staying on? Are we getting into the new?
Yeah, so
the
at this
other-
point, I don't think there's any reason to go into an executive session to do any deliberation on that matter, which, by the way, will obviously take some time when we get to that point as well. So I know that we have at least Mr. Mooney present. I don't know if his client, Mr. Mooney, is your client here?
I think both my witnesses are in the waiting room.
I see. All right. So what we'll do is then we will, I'm just looking at the number of people that are here currently. All right. I think what we'll do then is we can open that next meeting. If Melissa, you can let all the others in that are in the waiting room.
I believe we have to sign out of this one, Dan, and into that one.
Oh, that's right. We have
That's
another,
what
another
happened.
link. That's correct. I apologize. So why don't we do that? We'll end this particular meeting and go to the other link.